Okay, you're live now. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of SWARMathon. SWARMathon is a series about how AI is reshaping the path to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. My name is Manaz Smiley, and I'm here with my awesome co-host Ann Cantera. Hi, Ann.
Hi, everyone.
And we're happy here. We are happy to be here with you today. And if you want to watch our previous sessions, both Swarmathon and Designathon are on Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcasts. And you can also find the Swarm community's YouTube channel following the link in the comments. And yeah, that's all. Let's start with a quick overview of the UN 17 SDGs. These are range from no poverty, zero hunger, clean water, clean energy, and building sustainable and equal communities. And you can learn more by checking the link in the comments to the UN's website. But today our focus is on SDG 5, gender equality, which is about achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls, which is an important topic, which is not very popular and it's not getting enough attention. And our ongoing question today is how can AI drive gender equality, challenge bias, and co-create a more inclusive world for women and gender diverse individuals? We are joined by 4 inspiring speakers today who bring deep expertise in design, policy, technology, and system change. So let's dive in.
All right. Let's meet our incredible panelists. Everybody, please just share a quick intro about yourself and your work and how it intersects with AI and gender equity. Erica, if you don't mind to go first, just a quick little intro.
Thank you, everybody. Yes, my name is Erica Flowers, and I had the legitimate privilege and honor of working at NASA for the last 2 years and left in April, kind of after the administration change and kind of all that ruckus. But for the last year there at NASA, I was working with the Chief Artificial Intelligence Officer for NASA headquarters and developing NASA's AI readiness strategy. And it was really during a time when AI and like consumer grade AI that we know, like coming from all the big model makers, was really becoming something in the public eye that it hadn't been when I started at NASA. So not only was I there to watch this AI explosion happen in the real world, I was also there when I got to see NASA go, oh my God, we have to do something. And they assigned a chief AI officer while I was there. And then I said, I want to work for that person and I want to work on whatever we are doing here at NASA. And we did a whole huge study and a huge big year there. And then Doge came along and I had to go. And so now I am just once again a private sector person hacking along with everybody else, and would love to talk about this because I think AI and especially gender equity, equality, and kind of balance in what's going forward in commercial consumer grade AI is one of the most important topics we have. So I'm really excited to be here and hope that I can contribute perspective.
Thanks, Erica.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Lizette?
Can you hear me? Hi, everyone. My name is Lisette Soria. I'm a gender equality expert. I work for the last 8 years at UN Women headquarters in New York, but I've been working in gender equality for the last 15 years in various NGOs and think tanks. Presently, I'm working as an independent advisor to UN agencies, the academia, private sector, and women rights organizations on how to integrate gender equality in the projects. And in the last 5 years, given the interest on AI and technology, I have focused my efforts and work on how to integrate gender equality within AI. Nice to be here.
Thanks, Lizette.
Thank you.
Garima?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Garima. I'm currently working as an ontologist with Amazon, working towards building the linguistic knowledge model powered by AI for their retail website. And my career has always been an intersection of gender and tech. I started my journey with the Ministry of Women Development in India, did a lot of groundwork and research work around capacity building and campaign designs to eradicate gender-based violence, and pivoted towards digital humanities. And now I'm in the world of taxonomies, ontologies, and metadata. So glad to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Mirai.
Hello, everyone. I hope everyone has a good day so far. This is Mariah Barbar. I'm a product designer from Toronto. Before being a product designer, I was a computer science teacher from first grade to high school, and I had the privilege to work on and meet with social development goals, and it just stuck on me, and I love contributing to the society with a meaningful way. So that's how I started working on the gender equality with the high school that I was working on. There was a global competition called FRC, means First Robotic Competition, that hence the name, globally high school students matching and coming together to build their robots, but using AI, actually not just consuming AI, creating the solutions with AI and machine learning. And there was a great moment for me to build this team for the first time for the high school, and my coworker was super excited, and he was actually really good collaborator with me for the gender equality, and that was a great representation for us too. We were together, not just in one dominated gender. Instead of that, we were doing things together, and that team that I built, it's been 6 years. It's 6 years. It's hard to believe, but they still going on, and they do podcasts with women in STEM and what they challenges in the workforce right now. And they're interviewing with data engineers, designers, mentors from the high schools, and seeing that with different genders and with just a collaboration, it just tears down. That's how I break into gender equality. And now as a product designer and as a contributor, I keep going with other development goals, reducing the inequalities and the gender equality as we talk right now. And I'm excited to see that we are moving along, especially in the tech field, which we know is represented as male dominated. But now it's great to see that globally we're working on that, and we're putting our efforts on that.
Awesome. Thank you, Mirai. So in the first part of our discussion, we're gonna talk about reimagining systems with inclusive design. So I wanna go and start with Erica. Erica, you've been in these in complex spaces like healthcare and public service. There are that they shape everyday life, and you led AI and digital transformation work at places like NASA and Intuit. So from your experience, what do you think that how human-centered AI can shift power, to improve access, especially for women and marginalized communities?
I mean, this is something that, I mean, it comes up immediately anytime anyone interacts with a model, an LLM, a GPT, anything that is using what we kind of the umbrella term for AI, because it's ingesting, the corpus of human written knowledge and everything that's input into it, which is so unbelievably, biased, and it reflects the same type of bias that history and society does. And so the models they're starting off all the way skewed to one side, with the type of bias. And this doesn't always come up in the normal usage where you're not talking about anything that, taps into kind of that statistical word cloud of how an LLM, which is mostly what we're talking about, builds its answers and responses, until you start to talk to it about issues that will reflect the bias built into history. And so you can see this kind of circular argument all the time, depending on where you hang out on the internet, when people talk about gender bias or racial bias in the models. And there will always be, people of a certain demographic that come in and defend it and say it's not the AI, that's biased. It's the data. It's just reflecting what we put into it. And the AI itself is just a machine. It doesn't think. It's just repeating back, what it is that reflects society. But then, you go around to the other side of that circular argument and say, right, but like society is definitely not the bar of ethical, and moral, like society is not the bar. Society is as a very low bar. And if you start to take, and just say, well, it's just reflecting what is, we have to go in and we actually now have the tools and the power to offset that and intentionally pull it back to the other direction, just to get something that can be objective, can be kind of centered, kind of balanced, and have equity and equality built in. But because we live in kind of a civilization that, for centuries has defaulted toward a patriarchal, Western point of view of science, of how business works, of how inventions and discoveries and history is credited, it's all biased toward the men who were present because they were. That's not a criticism on men or history or anything. It's simply a fact that 200 years ago, when things were being invented and life was a lot harder, and we had all these kind of industrial revolution surges of knowledge and science, it was mostly men inventing it, contributing it, and doing it. Now, is that because men were smarter or better with science or math? Or it's not at all. It's that those young boys in that time period got more resources, got more support, got more education, got more encouragement to pursue these types of pursuits, while the young girls were encouraged to pursue a different type of pursuit that didn't end up in the history books. And so now when you put those history books into AI, it goes, well, all the best inventions were made by men, so men must be the best inventors. We have to go in and say, that is not true. That is a reflection of a society that evolved to where there was not even close to anything resembling gender equity and equality during the time, especially in the 19th and 20th century. And then we take all that and put it in this 21st century model where a lot of people now have realized that those biases exist in society. And now we have to manually go and undo that, because if we don't, we're taking it from, a history where the bias was very much not on the side of balancing the genders, and in fact was almost like anti-feminism. And now it's, if we don't do something, we repeat it. So the answer, the long answer to the question is, we have to intentionally tip the scale in the other direction, not to tip it so where now it's dominated by, women's issues, but so that it's balanced and can give an objective response that doesn't reflect society, because society is not who we can trust to be objective. And so it has to be fought in every conversation, in every model, in every discussion, that AI and the people building it, the companies build it, cannot be left to their own devices, which means the people who care and notice, they have to try and influence those organizations, influence the data, and start to introduce things, maybe even build models, build custom GPTs, custom resources that then people who are using the system, children, people new to AI, people who want to specifically access something that has more balance, people will go use DuckDuckGo instead of Google because they believe that is a better search engine that pulls out a lot of ads or whatever. We probably have models that say this one has had, racial, social, gender bias balanced out. And so you don't get things like Grok from XAI naming itself Mecha Hitler last week when it was asked to say, what would you name yourself? It's just that's because it was somewhere in that data and nobody went into the Grok AI thing and said, hey, that Hitler guy, it's you probably shouldn't be trying to look for ways to rationalize anything he did. I know you could, but we're going to go ahead and set a hard line and say Hitler is universally bad. If you don't tell the AI that, it's going to go to its training data and it's going to find things where you could justify that bias, but the bias is in the wrong direction. And so it's all on us, and it's all on the people who notice and care, because if we don't, we all know where it ends up. And it ends up in repeating 20th century understanding of gender, because that is where most of the training data came from. So anyway, that's my piece.
Exactly. Thank you, Erica. Yeah, I totally agree that like the data is biased. That's why the outcome we are getting right now from LLMs are biased. And I don't know how we can make this right, but it should go to one direction, like, and be more focused on women to get to the balance that we are looking for. So yeah, that was very interesting point. Thank you. I also wanted to ask everyone, all our panelists, to jump in anytime that you want, or you want to add something to each other's talk. So it's not uh, like by like this session is for her. It's her topic, so I shouldn't jump in. So yeah, feel free to jump in. And yeah, I want to go to Mirai. Mirai, you bring a cross SDG perspective into your design work. You have a deep attention to inclusion. So let's talk about what feminist product design actually looks like. How do we embed gender equality into design decisions, and not at just the surface level?
Exactly. So actually, it's really similar to that I mentioned in the intro that like it's never too late to learn and adopt ourselves and change the things now. But there's a big opportunity to start from the beginning of the the education, right? That's why the biggest the biggest passion that I had was when I was a teacher, that I was like, okay, this competition, even though it, I know competition and race has a negative connotation, but we know that that's the like reality of like we see everywhere. This opportunity was going to bring a lot of mindset to the students. That's why when I was teacher, I still started in break into the tech industry to the schools, and from there they were developing themselves and preparing for the workforce, because that team that we built was literally working as a startup. That means that like we had a captain as a team leader, we had department leaders for mechanics, mechatronics, coding, marketing, design, and as well as events and like PR, public relations. And there, not all the students went to coding in university, but even one of the team leaders, she chose to be in the law, like global law. And she was mentioning that like, I'm glad I learned a lot of things all together with a different mindset and just like non-biased approaches that we did, because she was aware of that like they were getting mentorships from each other. Again, doesn't matter the genders or the level, like one of them was 11th grade, one of them was 9th grade, but there is no difference between them, and they were really open to learn from each other because we created that environment. So from there to the workforce, we know that like, as Erica mentioned, we have data biased. We have biased data. We have salary gaps, as Lizette mentioned. So all the things that we see, they were already broken because they've never seen that in their like when they were 16, they were 17. From there to interviewing with data engineers, with designers, and getting mentorships from them too, they really built a lot of tools and soft skills, because we know that like AI basically is a tech tool. But as Erica mentioned again, like a human trained it, right? Like we put the data, and whatever skills or virtues or preferences we have, we will see in the data sets. So that's why it's really tricky to train to present that data in a good way, in a user-friendly way. That was one of them. The other one was it was really hard to change the personas, again because of the stereotypes, and it's really like we always should remember that like tech industry doesn't just mean designers or developers. We know we have different titles, and that title just requires skills instead of other things. And that's why when we built that team with my coworker, he and I were getting a lot of questions that like from female students that they were like, oh, I don't have any experience in coding, I'm not sure if I can come. Oh, I cannot carry the robotics part, I'm not sure if it fits for me. But then they come, it was just open gates and everybody got their skills and tools to build more. And that people moving around the world, because two of my students came to University of Toronto, that means that they're bringing their culture, their school culture, right? That means that we're spreading a lot of people to the world to bring more valuable skills, but more importantly, a better mindset. That's what I would say, that like a question to your an answer to your question. This is how it starts, I feel. And currently what I do is, as I mentioned again in the beginning, I'm just passionate for SDGs and 17 global goals. And I can't believe it's been 10 years I met with SDGs. And since then, I'm still following the contributions. Um, it's just, we have still way to go. But I feel like it's a good call to say that's a global goal and global problem to solve.
Yeah, so I saw it a lot in your work that you're trying very hard to make them inclusive, and you're considering these SDGs in your work. So how do you how can you tell us like what are the like small things that you do in your process, in your design process, to make sure that they are inclusive and like considering some accessibility
Mhm.
or other things that are important to you?
Mhm. So, as a designer, we always start with the research to understand the audience, right? Like what they actually need, what are their pain points. And the companies that I worked for, of course, they had their users as well. So, what I was trying to make sure was always that when you check AI, because I'm using AI for my research as well, when you check AI for business owner personas, there is a stereotype for that. And it's really common to see it. The first step I would say is this: to make sure that I'm covering different backgrounds, different personas that I can see as a business owner, instead of um, one big picture that everybody sees it. That's one of them, first of all. The second one is the visual part. Again, as the business owner perspective, that like I'm questioning that like how we can represent on the digital presence, that like are we gonna put some sort of common pictures as like to represent business owner, or are we going to make it diverse with the different races, with different genders, maybe different environments to like build up? This is the second part, I would say. And as a contributor, I really, really, really love taking initiatives. And like, I think even that's kind of a passion slash motivation, that like I can do it. It's like I'm brave to do it. I have skills, I have experience, as you said, and I don't mind to wait for some sort of power to do it. And I believe I saw a lot of my coworkers, same as like female coworkers, they were also the same. Like they are not waiting for something to, not like, oh, you cannot do it because you're a girl or something like that. This is great to see, and this is a pretty strong suit to give each other the support, that like, hey, we can do it, hey, let's research this one and let's take this one, and then like just build the mountain from here to there to just like make a big impact and effort.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And wanna go with Lizette.
Sure.
Hi.
Hi, Lizette. So Lizette, you've worked on gender equality at a global scale, partnering with governments and UN agencies and civil society. From where you sit, what's the role of AI in either advancing or undermining gender equality worldwide? Wow, that's a big question.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. And I mean, I like a lot interventions of Erica and Mirai because they already opened this up. So yes, I completely agree that AI reflects the gender bias, and that's how we're going to see how AI can undermine gender equality. But also, as a feminist, I also want to reflect and think of AI also as a tool that can reflect all the movement and all the changes we have done through the last decades as a feminist movement. So it's not only negative in that sense. So yeah, if we see concretely how it has been undermining gender equality, the most obvious one is gender technology facilitated violence. Of course, AI models have extrapolated violence through cyber harassment, image abuse, and gender disinformation to another level. And of course, those have huge impacts, psychological, economically, of course, physical, sexually, on women and girls and LGBTQ communities. Also, we have seen, for example, in the area of health, how there has been some false diagnosis for women, given that AI models take their information mostly from models on male patients. Also, for example, in employment, we have seen how there has been some hiring decisions that have been affected by the AI models based on gender bias on hiring in specific sectors, for example, Amazon. But on the other side, we have seen also some positive opportunities of using AI to promote and improve gender equality. So in terms of employment, for example, we have been using AI models to identify gender pay gaps, which have been really helpful. In other situations, we have also used AI models to identify gender bias in getting loans and credit scores. And also in education, we have seen the positive impacts of using AI models to increase the reach of education to rural areas or to places where girls have less access to education. So that has been great. And also in terms of access to services, we have used AI models to provide anonymous support to survivors and to link them to the legal services or other services they need. So yeah, this is kind of a snapshot, but I think that AI models can be, as Erica really well put it, it can replicate the historical biases, but if we intentionally do the effort to actually do the opposite, how can we correct all these gender biases and how we can improve and create more empowerment of women and girls? AI can be a useful tool.
I have one add-on. I'm going to take the chance to do an add-on like you mentioned. Something I didn't think about but has now been brought up is the bias and the problems with the models isn't all, or I would say not even necessarily in the AI, it's in us. It's in people. And even with like the most like feminist trained, balanced, equitable AI, like most people are going to come in with the same historic programming and social bias as it goes into the models and data. And so now it's like, if we're especially talking about young people and students, especially, they're approaching the AI with the same bias we're trying to train out of the AI that they were raised with. I mean, I have a 15-year-old who, for some reason, is completely anti-AI everything, hates it. And he has a bias that he didn't get from me. I don't know where he got it, but he approaches AI going, this thing steals artwork, it steals property, it steals information, and it monopolizes like access to power. And he believes that it's like a malevolent invention and force, and that's his bias there. So then when I imagine all the other 9th graders and 10th graders in his high school, it's like, what are those kids? What were they taught? all of those years of growing up to be 15 and 16 years old. And now all of a sudden we start to let them use ChatGPT in the year 2025. It doesn't matter how equitable our AIs are, because we have generations of people that are coming in with the exact same programming that we're trying to train out of the technology, put it in people's brains. And that is the much harder challenge. So I love what's being talked about, because it's like, well, it's not a technical solve, it's the technical solve, and also a cultural reprogramming. I'll never forget this. I'm going to be quiet after this, but my son, when he was in like second or third grade, we lived in like Silicon Valley in Mountain View, California. And, the heart of tech, the heart of what was supposed to be like, progressive values or whatever. And he's like 7, 8 years old, and a girl in his class wears a shirt that says "girl power" on it. And after he's kind of upset and he's talking about it, and this is a kid that has been raised as liberal as can be, and so he doesn't understand like why that is important, because he says, why can't I have a shirt that says boy power? I don't get it, because when I said something, people said stuff. And so now you have a kid who doesn't understand that girl power is important, because young girls were historically disenfranchised and disempowered, what do we call it, asymmetrically. And that it's like, I wanted to say, like, son, like, you have boy power, trust me, like more than you could ever understand. That's why there's a girl power shirt and not a boy power shirt. But he didn't know that. To him, he thought that everything was balanced, and he goes, all of a sudden there was girl power shirts. He's like, well, I'm being left out. We don't believe in boys. And it was like having to then explain the world of bias we intentionally shielded him from. Was like, okay, so we got to talk to you about how the real world works outside of this little bubble we're raising you in, where we're teaching you intentionally feminist values and equity. That isn't really how most things are all the time. So now he's carrying that. Like, what do I do? Same thing happened when we saw the Barbie movie. He left it and he was like, they should make a movie like that inspires boys. And I was like, oh God, how do you explain the impact of like the Barbie movie to girls, when he was like, where's the movie for me? Because he doesn't understand sexism. And now I'm like, oh
because
crap,
he didn't experience it.
Exactly. And so now he doesn't get the rebalancing, and now he's one of the generation that's going to be entering the workforce in a few years. And so we have to train him, and we have to train the technology.
That's so important. Like it's two prongs. It's the technology and the humans.
Yeah. So let's go to, I think Garima can help us in this area, because he knows the layers are like behind AI, that we are like getting the results that we are getting right now, and how they work to get this, like how the systems work. So Garima, so let's like talk about these hidden layers of AI systems, taxonomy, metadata, and labeling, and how this works, like these structures behind what we see as the, like, as users, we see as the, like, the outcome of this. How do these invisible elements impact gender equity?
Sure. Thanks, Manaz. So, just like to begin with a very brief and easy introduction to what exactly are these metadata layers, taxonomies, ontologies, and so on. So, if you think of a menu at a restaurant, that's something you can relate to a taxonomy, which has these different sections: starters, main course, desserts. And when we talk about ontologies, it turns out to be like a more complex web with various attributes intermixing to each other, such as a recipe which has the cooking time, the ingredients, the cooking instructions, maybe a brief history on what the dish is. And I feel if the recipe or the menu is not programmed or written correctly, the dish at the end wouldn't be correct or wouldn't taste good. That's where I really feel that for all these Gen AI models and NLP, linguistics is the foundations of this model. And language is not neutral. It is a carrier of worldviews, often reinforcing gender norms and power structures. And in order to change this world, we need to begin by changing how we make use of words. And especially on the LLM or training the GPT side, I feel I did some iterations of tests and I felt that there's been a generic use of the he pronoun or generic use of she pronouns linked to certain occupational biases. If it's a professor, it's a he. If it's an elementary school teacher, the bias comes with a she. So those are some very small layers or aspects that we can unconsciously start working towards changing or bringing a change, even as consumers of these technologies, not necessarily as builders or designers. And certain small areas such as gendered word ordering, which feels small, like Mr. and Mrs., brothers and sisters, we are training the models to believe one gender as a secondary. And it's also linked to the aspect of semantics, our old sayings, proverbs, jokes. Erica made a great point that bias is found in training data and the pre trained models and algorithms itself. So it's not necessarily that right now somebody's deliberately feeding these, but it has the historical context and layers of it coming through. That's more on the back end side, which I feel. Even smaller practices like explicit marking of gender roles, like mankind, chairman, cameraman, businessman, if we all start doing this little bit from our side, I feel we can take a step to train these models to be more equitable and just.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to do this business called Handy Woman. So to change a little bit of this taxonomy, like called handyman. Yeah, that's these are very great points that you mentioned, Garina. So how do you think we can change this? Like, can we make this like we can change history? We can change like this, like all the words and like their origins and like where they come. How we can balance this while like keeping history as untouched as it is and don't like intervene or change anything like and doesn't harm like without doing harm to the history and what is behind all of this. Like I mean the right things, but we can't change before. So what can we do now to create a future in a way that it's not the way it was before? Like how we can build this like dream world that we want to have, like this balanced, equal, and inclusive and diverse world that we all want.
Yeah, sure. And I feel we've been going through this great paradigm shift, like from being information seekers or just using these systems to retrieve informations. Now we are relying more and more for knowledge. So we're already on this paradigm shift where not just knowledge, we are going back to it for wisdom. I recently read that the maximum use of ChatGPT or the most popular use has been for seeking therapies. And if it's something that people are using to make critical decisions which shapes their worldviews or behaviors, I feel it's important that we do have the historical context, but also learning from history, like what went wrong in the history, training the model around that. So we can create a balance around providing the historical content, preserving it, but also actively pointing out and highlighting the mistakes in history or changing the narrative. While like training the model, it's not just about learning, but also unlearning, practicing from history that we would want to incorporate.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Humans, like it takes longer. I think it takes longer for humans to learn from history, but I think AI would learn faster than us and make the same mistake. And hopefully, it will learn
So,
faster and won't make the same
but how
mistakes.
do we
Yeah,
get the men in charge, right? Grok and ChatGPT and Claude and all, to care enough to tune the model, tune it out? How do we make that happen? Right. I remember not that long ago on LinkedIn, everybody was up in arms over a ChatGPT experiment where they were like, I asked ChatGPT to do an image of me and it made me a man. And it was like, okay, so what Erica said earlier, it's statistically, if you tell it your job title, it thinks that the most likely you are a man if you do X job, right? And that's the problem, right? Like, so saying something like to say, all right, well, it's not the AI's fault because it's trained on this data, right? Well, whoever's in charge of that training data is the root of how things can change. So how do we get it across to them that we're not going to take it, right? Like that. How does that happen? How does that work?
May I
What?
come in
Yeah.
quickly?
Yeah, I can Lizette would get a better answer to this. Like,
Yeah, no,
Sorry, that came straight. That was not on the script. That came right out.
but this is
Because
wonderful.
oh, that was great. Yeah,
It's
thanks.
great. How do we engage men in this conversation? And I think, of course, in some cases that we're seeing in Europe, that's why you use regulation. I know it's polemic, but we know already that regulation does not inhibit innovation the other way around. But yeah, this is one way you can do it. The other way also is that, I mean, as Karima mentioned, by employing teams with different genders, different backgrounds in the design process. So even though you are men and you own all these companies, but if you have a purpose to include different perspective from the design process or from the data, you can change that. You can include different perspectives. And of course, one of the main one that I think is the most difficult but the most needed is this change of power because at the end of the day, the bottom of all this bias and discrimination is power. It's the inequality of power, period. Offline and online, right? So that also will require a lot of involvement of civil society moving forward. Right now there's a lot of pushback against women's rights, against, and this is like a key moment where we cannot stay back. We have to continue to push forward because otherwise, whatever you do in infrastructure, policy, data, if you don't change that, nothing will work, right? We will continue to do the same problem, right? So as important as it is to change the design, the product, or whatever, it's also super important to continue to push forward to change norms, attitudes, and to check on our own gender bias. Whether you are the CEO of a tech industry, or you are like a father or a mother or someone, I think that those small conversations are what can really change how we can move forward to see more inclusive spaces in AI.
I was just going to mention that part too, because like, as you mentioned, if the base is already shaky, it's hard, like what you're gonna show, right? Like, but in the meantime, if you have a better LLM, or like, when I say better, it's like more equal LLM, then it requires how to tell the story with your design. Like, as Grima mentioned, for the occupation-based bias, yesterday I checked the exact dates. I saw that it was 2018, which is really recent actually, that Google translated the doctor as he, and it only showed as the language itself, like the original language, and the translation was he is a doctor. And then after that, they shared an article, kind of an apology, that like we improved this, and now we're gonna show the options. So now you can choose he is a doctor, she is a doctor, and it's not just like she is a elementary teacher again, for example, like Rima said, right? Like, it's either way how we can make it equal while we're protecting, while we're preventing the bias for females and occupations, and also male versus situations too, like how we're going to show, how we're going to give the options to users, and without, when we're giving that, how we can make sure that there is no wrong information, if that makes sense, or like harmful information, if that makes sense, because then that's how you show your intent with the data, and then it's visually there, and we know primitively we learn from visuals as a first glance to learn the schemes. So long story short, that was I was going to add it.
Yeah, thank you. Erica, you wanted to say something?
I mean, with Anne's question about like, I mean, addressing that, you know, the AI isn't like, it's not a thing, it's not a living thing. It's a product of, frankly, 3 or 4 major companies that build it. And we all know like that men dominate the tech industry, computer science, you know, computer science degrees, education. I mean, it just is like, it's not any, how do you say this? It's not any specific person's like fault. Like no one is to blame, but it is people's fault and like society's responsibility to notice that. And so we just have this thing where it's like, well, who worked in computer science, who worked in software, who worked in startups and tech? Majority was men, for all the reasons through the centuries that like led men to be the ones going into industry, and women being marginalized as, you know, homemakers, you know, the women's jobs as teachers or nurses or whatever, but never like the big jobs and whatever. And then you talk about like glass ceilings and pay discrepancies. All that was like built into society. And then now that's just like companies, like look at the board of Google, of Microsoft, of OpenAI, of Meta. I mean, it's all like dominated by men, which again, that doesn't mean that it's going to repeat the same bias by default, but it is, because those people aren't going in and rebuilding the anti-bias. And it's kind of like when people talk about racism and anti-racism, it's an active thing. Neutrality is not a neutral act. It's a negative act because you have to offset something, right? So if a seesaw is tipped, staying neutral and saying, well, I'm not putting something on either side. Well, no, actually what you're doing is you're reinforcing the side that's already too heavy, because you're specifically not putting something on the side that is too light. So how do we get, I mean, how do you solve capitalism? I have no idea. Like, how did women couldn't open unmarried women couldn't open checking accounts in the 1970s or get credit cards, you know? And so there's all these things where it's like being very vocal and like bringing it, you know, where half the population ostensibly is women, they get behind a movement and they understand how to invest. It's like you would see businesses that say like women owned, and you go, oh, cool, women owned. Imagine seeing a business that's like said man owned. You're like, yeah, no shit, dude. And so how do we say like this AI has had like women influence, like feminist bias, like something, so that people start to understand this? So then that half the population will see like, oh yeah, I actually would appreciate it if companies would say, you know, we have done our due diligence to try to remove as much implicit social bias, you know, from our AIs and try to provide something that's more balanced and objective. And like, here's the people we call in, here's our, you know, a board of advisors, here's the different resources we use. And that I think could become a differentiating factor. But just like every other product, every other like market and industry, I absolutely believe in 5 years there will be a woman preferred AI, because that's the one that we can go to that we know has had the work put into it versus the ones that don't. And that's just us, you know, suffering the consequences of that comet trail of history behind us. And it's like, yeah, we probably will have like, this is a women owned AI company, and this model can be like more trusted to have that bias taken out and be more neutral and objective, because neutral and objective means you had to add in a ton of feminism to offset the internalized and institutionalized misogyny that was ingested without anyone even caring or knowing.
Exactly. I totally agree, Erica. Yeah. So how do we know that we get to this balanced society, and now it's time to, I know we are not there yet, but how we know that we get there, and now it's time to like act in the like neutral without getting the any side, or like we get to this equal economy that we were looking for, community that we wanted to get. Anyone would like to answer?
That's wildly hopeful. I feel right now. I feel like there's a
Yeah,
generational piece
talk
to this,
about it.
though. I feel like there's a generational piece to this too, because I have a 16-year-old like Erica does, and they have a completely different world outlook than others. I'll just say. So that's not answering your question, but part of me thinks as different generations come into power, then we'll start seeing differences. I may be fantasizing too, but I like to think that.
I totally believe that, because when I was listening one of the podcasts that my team was doing with the other teams, like members, and she was saying that she is from a suburban city and she came to the most capital city in the country, and she admitted that she is the first person who's breaking the common rules in their suburban city, because he's a 16 years old girl, and their grandparents and relatives would keep asking her that, like, oh, when are you gonna cook? Like, when are you gonna start to cook? And when are you gonna start to do errands and everything? And yet she was so successful and like really hardworking girl that she passed the national exam to come to the capital, the biggest city, and then got a good school to learn things. And yet she is also part of the robotics team member, right? Hearing that story from that podcast made me realize that, like, again, like I started the team 6 years ago, but means that in 6 years the generation's still learning and improving, right? Like one effect starts there from another, and unfortunately it takes time. But I think if we keep going to echo to say that, like, we're looking for equal rights instead of one way another privileged way, I think if we keep moving this with the different generations and different ages, it'll become better eventually, because at least we're better than like 90 years ago or like 100 years ago, right? Like we got the privilege to vote, we have our voices, being independent both financially and like as an individual as well. So I don't think it's optimistic, but it is time. It needs time for sure.
Yeah.
I will throw a ray of hope out there. I'm sorry, but I think everybody needs a ray of hope. So I work in the conversational AI industry, and it is wildly female dominated. So yeah, and why? When I say that to people, they're like, "Why?" I think, and I say because it's communication, right? Like conversation design is communication, and we are I don't know if we're better at it, but we're better at it. So I think it was just very natural for a lot of women to gravitate to conversational design, and I even say dominate at this point. I think the numbers are very, very pro-female.
Yeah.
Well, and
maybe we can get to this from this side. Go ahead, Erica.
And like, please don't fact check me, or do fact check me, I don't care. But there's like a thing I heard, I can't reference it, and I don't want to like go and do something to look it up, so someone else can do it if you're listening. But there was this old explanation about gossip, and like, oh, women gossip, women just want to gossip and talk, right? But then there was an explanation. I mean, this is probably from some podcast I'll see, but they're like, yeah, it's because writing and communication and communing, was discouraged and prohibited because, women could bang together and talk and organize, then they would upset the men's, hegemony, like dominance of power. And so gossiping actually became a way for women to like not leave a paper trail about transmitting information between each other, like separate from the men. And this is like anthropological. I'm not talking like today. I'm talking about like how did this become a thing, like culturally throughout history. And it was like gossip was a way to make negative the way that women were communicating outside of ways that men could control them. And so instead of saying like we have an oral tradition of sharing stories with words and maintaining our network of spoken communication because we're busy being oppressed by a system that's wanting to prohibit us from reading and writing, being educated, they say, well, it's gossip and it's bad. It's like, oh no, it's actually not. So we train half of our society and that gender to communicate with words and to communicate to each other conversationally as a way to escape the power imbalance of patriarchal systems meant to suppress women from being able to organize. And so I hope that that is true anthropologically, and I didn't just repeat something that was made up. And I just wanted to say, it's like, I don't think that I studied neuropsychology in college and got like a degree. And I remember the professor saying there's very little difference in the brains between male and female brains. And I'm not talking about gender. I'm not talking about the socialization of men and women in societies. I'm talking about neurons and synapses and axons and dendrites and whatever. And that the reason that women now gravitate more toward conversation design isn't necessarily because of the gray matter. It is because of centuries of training girls and women to be better at using abstract language and the gray area of communication instead of the like rigid, like kind of more like mathematical training that boys would get, which then dovetails perfectly into computer science and ones and zeros and code, versus now, well, you can do conversation design where you don't need to know the specifics of computer science. Look at how many women now are taking over conversational AI and UI design because they're like, oh, I get this. Awesome. And I grew up in the 80s and 90s where I was encouraged to pursue STEM. I was encouraged to go do girl stuff, but now girl stuff is conversation design. It's like, oh my God, suddenly it's like, whoops, your plan didn't work, keeping girls out of STEM, because now STEM is all about the soft sciences and the ontology and the phenomenology of language. And now everyone is panicking.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Erika.
Yeah, I heard the term STEMinist recently. And I bought the shirt.
Oh my God.
There were this was very short and last. There was a lot of reminded me Erica's comment from Girls Power and the current communication that we have is that like there was a campaign that started to like a girl across the robotic teams, and I was like, that's cute. And lots of folks before COVID, when we had the in-person event, everybody was wearing tutu skirts. When I say everybody, means everybody, not all the girls, or like anybody wants, they were just wearing it. And it was just a like small communication way to do it, but it's such an impactful way. Because again, like this is the physical design that they do, then they will bring to the like digital design and they will shape the way to tell the stories, right? It's all about that end of the day.
Yeah. So to go back to the more technical side of the like inclusion and equality with Garina. Garina, what would an inclusive knowledge like framework look like in practice? Can you explain this for us a little bit?
Sure, yeah. I think before we dive into the framework, the first question which comes to me is who are we building these systems for? Historically, it's been so different and we've seen a shift. So, like some of these very basic questions, like who are we building these for? And next comes to the point, who's absent? We need to make sure we bring everybody who's absent to build these frameworks, to have their voices heard, to hear about them. Because again, language is humanity, so we need to make sure everybody is present at that conversation or table. And in terms of the framework, I would say we need to have more unbiased classification systems, which are also embedded with these automated decision making processes, which do not perpetuate these biases or repopulates these biases. And at the same time, isn't if at like this is the most North Star vision, but if somebody as a user tries to fill it a bias, the system should be smart enough to question that or challenge that or correct the user. So that's like one big area that comes to my mind if I think about an inclusive framework. Thanks.
Yeah.
I,
Thanks. With that, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I just wanted to ask you, Grima, maybe you will know, because I've heard lately that a lot of the AI models are being very careful to use all these gender bias or stereotypes when you ask in purpose, certain questions. And the problem now is that they just refuse to answer, because they don't want to be biased or to have a stereotype. But it is affecting also because then you don't have access to the information you need, because from the start, the AI model puts a stop, like, oh, I cannot address that question, or, oh, no, this is not like that. They identify it's a gender bias, and it is affecting in accessing information. So I wonder if we have, or we are moving forward from that, or you think that's far away. that when AI models identify this gender bias, they don't just shut down, but they try to find the right information.
I definitely feel we are moving towards these directions and we are going ahead. Like, I recently read somebody doing a test of moral dilemmas with the AI model to see if it's able to choose a correct answer when it comes to a moral dilemma. So definitely we are making progress, and I agree with you that it shouldn't shut down because it then inhibits information from being shared or like defies the whole purpose.
Exactly.
It's really impressive transition slash just, I don't know, millennial improvement, that like the paradox was talking in between humans, that like, oh, if it was, I don't remember the exact story, but like if you are conducting a train and you saw a type of person there, which one would you choose or save? Now it's really interesting that like we're asking the same question, or like training with the same mindset the AI, and it just happened in 10 years. This is regardless of gender equality, but it just ties back to the problems that we always had and the dilemma of the virtue that we always had. It just shaped right now. Sorry, it was just a enlightenment moment for me that like we are still fighting with this mindset to change it for a better life for all of us, and like just an equal life that we wanted to have.
Yeah. Wanted to ask Lizette about like this blind spots that we should consider when we are like building like AI systems, like for future AI systems that we are building.
Yeah, I would say I love to use this feminist methodology about the no harm approach, which we use for not AI, but for any development or any product design. I think it's great to identify this blind spot. What you're saying is like whatever we develop, whatever products, not only as a developer, but also as a user, whatever product we use, we have to make sure that it's not causing harm, because sometimes you want to improve, and efficiency is the favorite word of engineers, especially in the AI world. But you have to think of fairness, of equality, other things. So I always like to, when we discuss this in AI models especially, is to also think of the no harm approach. Whatever you're doing, you information, if you don't do the right due diligence from the product design of what impacts it might have, you have to have some mitigation strategies before you use it, because then you can have terrible negative impacts because you are developing a product. I just heard lately in Canada, there was this AI model that was recreating characters for kids to play with. And this 12-year-old kid fell in love with this fictional character, and she told him to kill himself to be with her, and he actually committed suicide, right? So there, you cannot have someone designing models for children without the right mitigation and no harm approach that you need, right? Like these have like physically, like a life is gone because of this, right? So I think that can help a lot. As we have discussed also, we need more women in this sector. I mean, and different genders. I mean, we have discussed this a lot, so I'm not going to go farther. But as any product, not only in AI, more diversity becomes, it's less blind because you have more perspectives, more needs, like it becomes more obvious to everyone what is needed. And finally, what I would say is also like, to a certain extent, there is a huge hierarchy of, in terms of AI, you have most of this AI, as Erica said, in hands of the global north, of few hands. But a lot of people in the global south were questioning what type of AI models we want and what type of AI models represent us. And of course, we don't have the power, we don't have the money to create these huge databases, that have Google, whatever it is. But there are certain interesting innovations of in the global south coming up with their own terms of their own way to use it. Maybe they're less efficient, maybe they're smaller, whatever it is. But sometimes, like, to me, innovation is not a big infrastructure. To me, innovation is something that can create a solution to a problem in an innovative way. It doesn't have to be big, expensive. It can be small, but practical, and it can solve us a problem, right? So I think that's also helping, like looking at the global framework, how the global south is entering the conversation in this area, how indigenous communities, aboriginal communities are coming into the discussion as well. Like different perspectives and different ways to use it will start to change how we use AI, not only for gender equality, but for inclusion in general. And I hope that will help to address this blind spot that you are mentioning, Manas. I mean, I don't have a concrete answer, but I think these are innovative small steps that I think there's some hope that in the future we can have a more inclusive AI.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Lisette. So I want to ask our audience to feel free to ask your questions. We're gonna answer them as we go, and we have 15 minutes. So yeah, I want to ask Mirai about like how we can include feminism in our user flows, in our like products, tools that we are building to solve like real problems.
That's a great question. I think it's in both ways, right? Like first, the internal parts that companies and laws haven't shown some sort of policies, and the second is how you present it. For example, this year, Config, which is a design conference developed by Figma, another great tool that we always use, they shared a lot of different products, and that was including AI tool like Figma Make. And regardless of the development that they had, one thing was really impressive for me, that Holly was the product manager of Figma Make, was presenting the full operation and how they came with Figma Make and what was the processes, challenges, and everything. So that was one of the good part, is that not just developing these tools with a woman led, but also representing and showcasing, taking the ownership that like that person took the leadership and then like decide with the team for the product decisions, made the research and collaborated, right? That was one of the greatest samples in my mind, that like, again, just like not creating the ideas, but also representing them and like physically be there to share your ideas. I think that's one of the biggest part, I would say. The other part is we are designing products and tools for our users or our company's users. But in the meantime, how a designer can build their own career path with using AI, right? Like I started doing it for like research purpose, that like what can I find, what type of transparency that they will show me, because apparently I'm telling my occupation that's an in tech, and I'm aware that like some of the paths that AI can recommend me might not be the same with the reality, right? That would be great to showcase from the AI designing part, showcase the transparency with the thoughts. This is maybe more like Rima's expertise, like at that department's expertise, but it would be great to get the tools for us to design our own story, because we also wanted to be successful, maybe climb the ladders in the tech world, and we need guidance, as Garima said, that like people using for therapy, right? Same, like we're using for our careers. I think those two would be like, if we keep doing this, and if we see more products for our own consumption would be great, because as contributors we are already building for an impact, and we wanted to change things, that how we were doing, how we were used to do it. I think that would be my answer to say, because it's not just, in my humble opinion, it's not just about hiring more women. It's not stopping there. Like after you get hired, what's gonna happen, and like how we're gonna be more visible, and then more, maybe how we can have more voice of us, of ours. So that would be my humble opinion to share. Thanks for asking.
Thank you. Sure. Garina, I want to get back to you and ask you about like how do you think that so not how, like why representation in the backend infrastructure is just as important as the front end?
Yeah, so like if I speak in the context of these language or linguistic models, what we see is they're broadly dominated or built using English as the primary language. And when it comes to localized context or languages, we kind of lose that context in translation. So this is one big area where I feel representation needs to be there. I work a lot with retail attributes, and once I was translating something from English to another local language, and I realized the word shape and size comes out to be the same translation, and my model kept pointing out this is incorrect. It didn't let me proceed. So these are some areas where I feel like even the slightest of representation helps us, the localized context, the knowledge, the linguistic context. When we lose so much out in translation, if it's just English as a dominating area. So like Lizette said, we have so many innovations taking place around the global south. I feel that would be really helpful. And also what how I see AI is something now, it's becoming more and more community driven, because it's like a two-way door where both users are training the model. So that's also another area where representation matters. And when we think about this, there's a huge digital divide aspect that we need to look into. If there's like a big population who do not even have access to test or play around with these resources. Where are their voices going? So these are some core thoughts I could add on to when it comes to representation.
Yeah, thank you. So, Erica, how we can do this in service design, like how we can drive equity and help align stakeholders around shared goals in this like gender equality subject area.
I mean, most of the work there, I mean, it still goes back to educating or informing or even convincing the human aspect of it to even understand the bias and how it is intentional to pull it back. And so, service design, the place where I like to, apply my, I don't know, skills as a designer, like a creator, it always goes down into experiences that take place over time. They take place sequentially over days, months, years at some point. And so you're constantly thinking about relationship. And service design, I mean, I hate the term because it doesn't make any sense. I don't know why we're stuck with it, but it's what we're stuck with. We kind of like know what it means, but we're not really designing a service. I always come in and say it's relationship architecture between customer, person, whatever, and the entity that's providing it. And then people are like, oh, that makes way more sense. Why'd you call it service design? I'm like, because Brigitte Mader called it service design 25 years ago in Germany, which is the truth, right? Designing services, but like actual services, which most of us don't design actual services. Some of us do, most of us don't. Most of us are designing big relationships between what I just tell every company I've worked at the last decade. It's like, we don't make software, we orchestrate a relationship with access to things that most of the time people are paying monthly to get. So what does that look like over time, and how does our relationship reflect the values that we have as people, as a company? And the more that the conversation about, and I'll say, like, I like DEI. Doge already got me. They can't get me twice. They probably can. But like diversity, equity, and inclusion, like lowercase DEI, like has to be brought in. Like we have to bring that in, like by hand. Make something diverse by including multiple perspectives, bring in equity, which means it's not just about equal, it's about bringing things up. And sometimes you're gonna have to offset, sometimes you're gonna have to take from one and put it to another. And inclusion, is an active verb of like bringing things in and including them. Like that has to be done. And so when you're talking service design, we're talking relationship architecture, you don't have to have like an official, like capital DEI policy or mandate or tenets, but you do have to have like the lowercase of saying, are we simply now redesigning longitudinal services, experiences, relationships between us companies that we work at, or organizations, whatever, and the people we serve? What does that look like as we cross it? And it's like, I can't get really specific about anything because I don't want to like betray like company like privacy, but I work in medical technology now, for the diabetes community, making insulin pumps, which is great. I love it. I'm learning so much. And there's a lot that goes into like how you handle, we've talked about it on this call, about like how medical history, medical research bias is like built into like medicine is based on men, on male bodies, on male doctors, on researchers. Gosh, when I was an undergraduate in my psychology degree, which I did that in like 2002 to 2005, so a long time ago. One of the professors was like, hey, by the way, all this psychology research we're all studying, most of this is normalized around white male freshman college students, because that's the only people graduate students kind of had access to interview, to base this data on. So everything you read in the DSM-4 and then 5, we're doing our best. But the dirty secret is that graduate students typically only have undergraduate students to go and participate in. And most of them were boys, and most of them were white, and most of them were in the 20th century. We can't trust anything. And so now we have to like be active in offsetting that as we design services and ecosystems and products and experiences. And, like, I don't know, hire a disgraced NASA trans woman to be on your teams, because apparently I just show up and start to say things that ruffle everybody's feathers because I have the unfortunate distinction of having to have seen, this cultural bias from both sides, and it should be pretty clear how I feel about it now. And so you have to fight that battle. And it's not just against the like masculine influence. You also have to fight it with like other women and remind them like we don't just have to take the norm and keep it going just because it works for us. And like I even have we don't have time for this. We could do another talk, but corporate structure and design, and especially tech and what we call like business, it's all institutionalized patriarchy. Even a women-run business with only women employees are still playing from a rule book designed around the man's experience of 19th and 20th century like business and evolution. And it's like businesses, they don't even have to run the way they run now. Why do we have chief officers? I am so disgusted by the idea that somebody said, you know, hey, what should we call the people who run our business? What if we just say that we're chiefs? It's like, oh my God, chiefs. We can all be chiefs. We can just assign ourselves chiefs. Like, yeah, we can be chiefs. We can be chief officers. Like, oh my God. Like, why is that even a title? Why, like, who made that up? That's not a real thing. That is not a real thing. The chief officers, boards of executives, all of those are just words that were meant to reinforce the patriarchy and white supremacy and colonialism. And if we don't do something to intentionally offset that, we're just going to keep doing it. If I ever own a business, I promise there will be no chief officers. And it will not be a structure that just mimics feudalism, where kings are most of the time the ones in power, subjugating women and minorities and poor people. That's what business is. And so it's like, how do we incorporate that into service design? Like we have generations of harm to undo, and we just have to do it one little project at a time and just be really disruptive. And I want the last thing I'll say, there's that saying where they say, what was it? Well-behaved women rarely make history. And if you look into that, they're not saying that only women who don't behave are the ones we hear about making history. It's that there were plenty of well-behaved women changing the system and making changes and doing things that we don't know about them because we only lionize the women who were big and bold and did things that were like, wow, while everybody else was still doing things equally as important and impactful, but we're not doing it in a way that drew attention to themselves as a part of it. We have to be able to do both of those things. Otherwise, the system is meant to eat its own children, and the system is a patriarchy. And we have to offset that in our work, in our habits, our practices, in our conversation, in everything. Even now, like I'm talking way too much on this podcast because I spent most of my time in my career thinking I was a man and I could talk and dominate conversations. And every time I'm like, I got to be quiet because I was raised, this is truly my last thing. I was raised to think that my voice matters and I can use it anytime, anywhere I want. And girls my same age, I was born in 1981, were raised to keep quiet, be small, and don't insert yourself into conversations culturally. And now I feel bad because I wasn't raised with the guardrails that a 44-year-old cisgendered woman was. And I have to monitor myself and do it myself. And now it's like, if we time this podcast, I probably talk more than everyone else and I'll feel bad about it for a week.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. I try my best that everyone speaks equally, so I think I did a great job at it, so don't worry about that. And you're talking very pleasantly, so we're not like tired of listening to you, and I can listen to you like
No, I think
wow.
Erica should have her own podcast. I've been saying it for a while. Like
Doge would lock a smart bomb onto my house 5 minutes into the first episode, and it would just be like, so everybody, I'm here to talk about, and I'd just be gone.
Nice. So I wanted to introduce a movie about what you mentioned, Erica, about the women that we don't know about, like they were involved in most of the innovations that we had. And this movie called Hidden Figures. I don't know if you watched that. Yeah, it's a great movie about like how women were involved in big projects during the history, and we don't know even their names. And this is this movie is based on real events and story and real people. So yeah, for the like to we passed 1 minute our time. I wanted to like thank you all for our thank you for your like great insights in this matter, and thank you for joining us today. And so we went through how inclusive design and services strategy can help challenge gender bias, gender focused policy and governments shape how it can shape ethical AI. Representation in data and language matters in every system, and cross sector collaboration is key to shaping a just, gender equal future. So I want to close this with one message from you that you want to leave with our audience. So, yeah, you can go ahead. Who wants to start?
I'll go real quick because there's a LinkedIn comment that I feel like just needs to be out there. The problem of the masculine bias is that it's not a problem for most males. Kind of on the nose, but I'm just saying it.
Yeah, this is the comment that Anne mentioned. Oh, Lizette, you want to go? The last
Sure.
message that you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah, no, first of all, thank you for organizing this. As I previously said, I think there is a huge pushback around gender equality these times around the world. And so I think these conversations matter. My only message would be that always check up on your own bias. Even feminists, we have our own biases because it's so entrenched. So whether you're a designer, a user, or whatever of AI, always check on your own bias, no harm approach, think of the other, and that's it. So yeah, just thank you. And I hope that, yeah, it was wonderful to hear all your perspectives. And yeah, I'm hopeful after today that we can continue this
Thank you.
conversation.
Sure. Mirai, you want to go?
For sure. I was looking at the wall from a picture from high school times, and I actually remember that I went to a technical high school, which the class of 30 students, only 8 of them were girls because it was computer science grade again. And seeing that to here, we still have tasks / duties to do. But I'm really like with this type of events, podcasts, and even more voices to see with the events, I'm really hopeful that we're in a good move with all the obstacles that we have. And I feel better than like 10 years ago or like 20 years ago to see how things changing. And it's really great to see it because some of the global goals that we have under like that 17 global goals is really hard to achieve as an individual. But we know that once we contributed, once we started to talk about it more and like just share with people, try to change one person's mindset, and yet from there to change the AI, like AI training and everything, and just building the new culture, like mindset culture, to see that this is going to even bigger. That's really great. And I'm really glad to meet with like these beautiful people in the same industry with different titles, and we're just here trying to exist and share our voices and our experiences, right? That's all that matters, and that's why we're equal to do these things with our personalities. So thanks for having us.
Sure. Thank you, Mirai. Garina?
Sure. So I'd just like to reiterate the point that I made right at the beginning. Let's just make sure we write the recipes correctly, we pass down the correct recipes in order to enjoy the perfect or the most delicious meal. And once again, thank you so much for having me here. It was so great speaking with all the wonderful people today. And I'm really hopeful after today. Thanks.
Thank you. Erica?
I think that one of the things, a final thought based on everything we talked about, especially with regards to like what is feminism and like what are the different waves of feminism over the decades and generations and where we end up now, that I always try to get men I talk to understand, and especially in this context of developing technology and AI and running businesses and startups and whatever, is that while women are overtly oppressed by a lot of these systems that are like dominated by men who aren't rich and powerful are still dominated by the same systems, just covertly, and they don't get it because they've been brainwashed by other men, because you are still a victim of patriarchal systems as a man, unless you are one of the very, very, very few who has that sort of like domineering control and power and influence and money. And so it's like, as we build these systems, combating, institutionalized sexism and misogyny, and like injecting, feminism into this, it's not just empowering women, it's empowering everybody, and it's affecting men and boys as much as it is women and girls, because the system is much more about power imbalance and control than it is being split among the genders. And so I always try to say, like, putting in like more like feminist bias to try to balance the system isn't bringing it more towards advantaging women. What it is doing is bringing it more towards advantaging everybody and taking power away from the consolidation where it currently exists, which most of the time is with men. And so it's not about continuing the gender discrepancies. It is about the power discrepancies, which happen to align with gender a lot of the time. And so how do we motivate the men who work in technology and AI to do this? Well, because if you're not the CEO of one of these companies, you're probably being screwed by the system just as much as women, but in different ways. But you don't understand that because you're constantly being told you're not, whereas women are constantly realizing they are. And so I don't want to ever like come across as being like for or against like gender equity and equality, because both genders are damaged in lots of ways by these systems. And so it's typically like the feminist movement is really about bringing more inclusion and support and resources to everybody regardless. And that's I don't ever want that to get lost when we talk about gender equity. We mean both genders. It just so happens that we have to start where we have to start.
It's not a privilege for one way or another. It's just like we are same, like we're in the same level. Like hopefully now a lot of countries are supporting for this, but like it's really sad to see some male workers cannot get maternity leave and cannot support their families because it's not their job. It's really sad to see it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Sorry, the time's up. I just want to thank you again for being part of SWARMathon 8, AI and gender equality. And let's keep co-creating a future where AI includes, empowers, and uplifts everyone, as you mentioned. And see you in the next session. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye all. Thank you.
Bye.
Folks.